Hey, it's Chris. 2 years ago, July, we're talking about the games on crowdfunding from 2 years ago. This is going to be a really interesting list. Really, a couple interesting points I'm going to bring up here that are a little bit irritating, a little bit interesting, and a little bit of everything in between. Good list today. Let's do this. So I was just filming prior to this, the July 2022 video. And the really interesting that struck me is that some of the games on 2022's list are much closer to fulfillment than the 2021s. Not all of them, but a few of them. And man, that's just irritating. You know, this is the one thing I say, come to crowdfunding with more of a complete product. You shouldn't be doing the rules a year after your crowdfunding ends, right? Pet peeve of mine. Okay, that being said, let's get into it. So, first up, one of the biggest of 2022, overall, very good solid reputation here. Copy sitting over there in my corner of the base game, Chronicles of Drunagor. A very interesting twist on the dungeon crawl style of things with more of a dark fantasy horror vibe, gothic horror, if you will. And they came back with the Age of Apocalypse and they ported from Kickstarter over to GameFound to a rather good success. And this was the first campaign that we saw this little easy pay thing, right? Like, if you can't pay for your crowdfunding all at once, pay it in installments. Yeah, there's nothing like paying installments on your crowdfunding. You know you have a problem when. I'm sorry, but I hate to say it. It's true. Now, they gave us a ton of cool stuff. These massive Horsemen of the Apocalypse miniatures that just look freaking sweet. They gave you the standee version as well. A couple new expansions. A reprint, though, of some of the base stuff that was slightly different. So you really had to get a lot of it potentially, and it was a little bit higher price point overall, unless you were just getting some of the new stuff. And that was sort of the interesting vibe here. And Creative Game Studios actually has their upcoming Dante's Inferno game also listed on crowdfunding on GameFound currently as an upcoming one in the near future. So what is that going to look like? What is that going to entail? I'm going to guess that we're going to see a lot more of that as soon as this one delivers. But like I said, $1.5 million. This was a really good campaign. I mean, you scroll down and you see even here on the Easy Pay, they raised another $500,000 on the secondary market with the Easy Pay. And I'm guessing the pledge manager put it well over $2 million as well. Very good, very well thought of style of game with the dungeon crawl, doing things differently mechanically from an upgrade, from an ability, from a dashboard side of things with a little bit of terrain and a splay. This is one of the oldest games in my collection that I have yet to, actually, I'm sorry, Creative Game Studio, because they sent me a copy to review and I haven't gotten that review out yet. I'm delinquent on a little bit too many of these reviews, but excellent game. The real question was, as with a lot of the other games we've seen recently, is it worth $400 though? That's the question you have to ask yourself when you're even talking the gameplay all in. Gameplay all in, folks, $410 worth of stuff. I mean, you're talking all 3 waves of Madara. You're talking a massive, 5 to 6 wave situation or campaign iteration of Aeon Trespass Odyssey. That's the level you were talking about back in 2021. So that's not insignificant. Speaking of Madara, a little crossover there. A little shout out to them as well. But that's what you're getting here. And the new content wasn't like massive amounts, but it was enough. And the new content all-in bundle was still $270, which isn't insignificant. The reprint, again, slight increase, slight nuance of change of some of this stuff. And I think they even threw in some of the stretch goals, which was the big issue at retail that you couldn't get easily. And the new content, just the Apocalypse Adventures, was the one I was really looking at on the campaign, as someone who had a copy at that point, of just getting this $95, because that's relatively reasonable, actually. Reminds me of getting Guards of Atlantis 2, just the core box. Now, if you go back to the update here over at the end of June, they give a little bit more production details. This was originally supposed to be delivered in November of 2022, so we're already 7 months overdue. At this point, though, they say, okay, where are things at? Now, the reprint of all 3 languages, we're getting close under the assembly line, so we're getting, to you maybe soon in the next 3 months or so. You're starting to see some of the miniatures here. Again, these are massive, and that looks forking amazing. I would love to have that on a shelf behind me. But is that the reason your production is so far behind potentially? Because you're looking at least probably a year overdue at this point by the time all of this stuff is delivered, right? The one thing I give them a lot of kudos for, and they're pretty transparent about these updates, which I don't mind. I mean, you're way behind, but that's okay. And then they give a lot of the history of some of the decisions that they've made. And it's really kind of nice reading through this if you have a chance. They also talk about, here's the real one you want to get down to, right, is a giveaway that they're doing in relation to some of this content with discussion of what they want to see or what you want to see in the future from them. So I kind of like that. Again, it's something that I will definitely be looking at picking up or trading for in the near future. But if pre-production, pre-campaign, I was probably, maybe a 6. I'm probably a 7.5 right now. And I don't say that about too many of these big box campaign style games, especially dungeon crawls, because they're a dime a dozen nowadays. But this one has always held a special place in my heart. And this is no different even now. So there you go. And just for comparison's sake, right? Like this is one of those campaigns that people kind of poo-poo the first time around. It only raised about $500,000 on Kickstarter the first time around. Over $2 million, including the pledge manager the second time around. Yeah, that's pretty impressive, folks. That's when you know you put out a good product that people are clamoring for it that much second time around. Vassal's Law or whatever, but still. Next up, from North Star Games, I actually have it right here. We'll just pull it out instead. We'll get rid of this Fields of Arl box, which actually is containing Puzzle Strike 3.0. But this is the deluxe edition of Paint the Roses from North Star Games. I did my review on this, delivered well on time, and was actually a really, really good crowdfunding game. 6,400 people, almost $350,000 raised. Just a very satisfying deduction game, but it's a little all over the place too. You really need to be concentrating. If you are not 100% in the focus in the game all times when you're laying this deduction style mix and match game down, you are easily going to get off with your headed. You're trying to race to the end of this map before the queen catches and passes you, and as the game subsequently goes and she gets further along and gets stronger, she takes more steps each round. She takes even more steps if you mess up on a deduction clue, because every single turn you're having to guess which one somebody else has, a pattern essentially. And if you can't guess right, she moves like twice as far. And so it's a little bit all over the place. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do with this game. It's just so thinky in terms of that. I can see it being a turn off. There's just a lot of nights you don't feel like, even in some of the strategic games, right? Like you pay 100% attention or you lose. That's what this game is. Great, solid, fantastic game. The insert I didn't think was that good, actually, all things being said. And I really didn't like the chips. If I can pull one out rather easily here. Let's see if I didn't totally screw it up. Nope, I can't pull it out easily. But on the back side of them, they all have like North Star Games written on them. It's just kind of aesthetically displeasing, if you know what I mean, right? I don't need to see the game of the company on every single chip when it's face down when you're drawing them on a turn-by-turn basis. It's just not necessary. It's overkill. So I don't know how I feel about this one yet. This one is on my, I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet pile. It's sort of the in-between. I could see myself trading it or selling it. I can see myself keeping it and not being hurt at all about keeping it. I just don't know yet. Mixed feelings 2 years out from the campaign, which is kind of a weird place to be from that aspect of things. So speaking of games that will not be in my collection, On Mars, the Alien Invasion. I believe the 3-in-1 modular expansions for the On Mars Lacerda game from Eagle Gryphon. Adding a cooperative, adding some solo, adding a little bit of everything in from that aspect. Along with the recent Lacerda price creep, this one was higher priced, as a deluxeified Euro that it is. Speaking of deluxifications and people shouting at the overpriced Chronicles of Drunagor that I just talked about a minute ago. But same thing with this, right? You can get, just as good Euros that are half the price. So this one's just over the top production-wise. Fantastic from Eagle Gryphon. Say what you will. I'll echo that point repeatedly. And again, a curious study of who's getting expansions for this heavy of game. And again, with all expansions, the necessary question has to be asked, do you actually need it in this case? This one was also an interesting test because with an expansion here, I have to think that it actually did really well if you ignore the money side of things, right? $388,000 is not really a ton. However, 7,000 backers, that is. So that's what you actually have to look at, because when you go down here and you look at the price point for it, the price point was only $50. So it's a little deceiving there to think, oh, well, this is a Lacerda game. It didn't get $1 million. That must not be any good. Well, it's $50, folks. 7,000 backers. 7,000 is very impressive. And that's a very high number, especially compared to the original campaign for the base game. Because if you hop over to the original page right here, I've got it highlighted down here, 10,000 people. So that's a huge proportion. I don't know if you pay attention to these numbers at all, but that is an absolutely massive proportion compared to the first, compared to the second campaigns with an expansion like this. And that can't be understated whatsoever from that aspect of things. Do you need it? I mean, I guess that's really the question. I have no idea, because this game is too heavy for me to actually know. It's been well delivered by now. People have had it for, almost a year at this point. So the real question is, how do you feel about things? A one versus all, a cooperative here, and then another solo or group co-op down here. And sorry, 4 chapters, not 3. I was wrong there. I mean, if you hop over to Board Game Geek, yeah, I mean, it only has 272 ratings. That's an awful small amount of ratings, but I'm guessing most people, if you're rating it, you're incorporating it into the base game rating in the first place. But it seems to be well thought of. I think that's pretty good. Again, no clue. You tell me in the comment section. Necessary, unnecessary, worth it, not worth it. I always worry about all of these combinations of solo, cooperative, competitive, especially one versus all. But, for $50, it's probably also worth the risk if you really, really like this game in the first place to get some more legs on it. Because, that's just what this game needs, right? More legs. It's not long enough and heavy enough in the first place. Teasing. Next one. Next up, we have Oros, becoming an all-powerful demigod, right? Or Hercules, whatever you want to call it. But this is a Euro-style worker placement game with a puzzle tile-laying aspect. I've got a copy sitting on my counter, thank you, Jeremy Howard, that is needing more plays for you to get my final thoughts from that aspect of things. But again, from a relatively new company, AESC Games, when it came to crowdfunding, almost 5,000 backers, almost $300,000. It's been in people's hands for probably about 9 months or so. A little bit of all over. Some people like the chaos. Some people like the destruction. Some people really didn't. And so it's been a little bit divisive in terms of, yes, I really, really like it. Or, you know what? This just isn't for me. Do you like shifting the landscape? Do you like a combination of, tile laying and Euro style mechanisms? Again, a very mishmash of mechanisms that we're not used to seeing, and I think that's why it's divisive a little bit. But it's got a 7.5 on Board Game Geek ratings, under 1,000 reviews, so take that for what you will. Value-wise, I've seen it for less in terms of the price of the deluxeified version than they were selling on the crowdfunding campaign, so that's never great. At the same time, that really doesn't always mean a whole lot. It just means that there's more copies available because you have, people probably buying something off of hype rather than, again, as I always say, buy what's right for you. So they had a relatively successful campaign. Yeah, it wasn't on time. Yeah, it was well delivered before this video. So that's a great thing. I think it was about 6-7 months overdue, but that's fine. I don't know what they're doing with this in the future. Do you want this style of game? Again, I think at retail, that was the big issue, right? You can get the standard edition for less, and I saw the collector's edition selling for a little bit less as well. So, all in all, if you're happy with the game and you really like what they put in here, who cares if you, lost $5 or $10 in terms of pricing from that aspect of things? If that's the worst thing that's happened to you on crowdfunding, that's great, right? Now, there's a little bit of exclusive here, but it's all non-gameplay as well, so you don't have to worry about missing anything with the other editions that come at retail either. I don't have much else to say right now. So, to be determined. Again, I could see this one being just like Paint the Roses. Keep it because it's doing something unique and something completely different, and I love it, or toss it because it's maybe a little too heavy, a little too long, and a little bit too worker placement for me. So, I could see myself going either way at this point. Time will tell. Next up, we're going over to the French company, One for All, and we're going to see where Soul Raiders is at. This 1 to 4 player cooperative open world survival game with more of a Seventh Continent-esque vibe than I was expecting, like the Lands of Galziers and the Splendor of Artisan's Vale. What was that one? I'm screwing that one up, but you can correct me in the comment section or I'll blow it over my face right now. That's the sort of style of game this was, with a little bit of combat, but not as heavy on the combat and more on the narrative exploration, survival side of things than we initially thought, which was an interesting twist. I mean, it still raised over 400,000 euros, which is great but I just wasn't sure what to make of it either when it came out. Now, again, with this one, supposed to be delivered just like Oros at the end of 2022, December of 2022. Well, let me show you where things are at right now in July 2023. And again, 30 hours of adventures, open style campaign, bunch of cards, very, very cool aesthetic here. Do you need the Grimoire edition or is the standard edition enough? That was one of the questions, but you really want to know where things are at. Well, they just literally prior to me filming this are opening the Pledge Manager, folks. Whoosh. 2 years later, you're opening the Pledge Manager? That's forking insane. Because if you go back to the previous update in April, game development and production here, they say the English translation will be finished by the end of April. The lore book still has a third of the content to be written. So I don't know what that actually means in terms of how much stuff that is. But if you scroll down here a little bit, it says that they're going to launch the production before the end of the summer. So August-ish, September, if you want to get technical. Over here in North America, I think summer officially ends in September. That's when it hits fall. So if you don't have the production finished, or if you don't have the production started before the end of September or the middle of September, 4 to 6 weeks production, 4 to 6 weeks shipping, 3 weeks plus that. I mean, you're lucky by the end of 2023, which puts this, well over a year late, which again, make a quality game. I don't care how late it is, if it's fantastic, but that's a long time so far, right? That is, at this point, right, July 2021, you could be looking at 2.5 years to get this game. That is forking insane. Is it worth it? That's what I talk about when you're putting up triple digits worth of money as an investment, essentially, as a gift, as an offering. How much of that can you afford to do continually? Again, pre-campaign with Soul Raiders, I was probably a 7.5. Post-campaign, I was probably a 4. The pricing, the mechanistic approach, the rule book kind of left me wanting. Again, I'll have my eye on it, but I know I'm still probably a 4, going to hold off, and it's not necessarily going to be as easy for me to get it because I'm just not a big fan of the Seventh Continent-esque. I'm not saying it's that, but it's reminiscent of vague ways for me in a card-style, narrative-driven, choose-your-own-adventure situations way of that. And so that's okay. Now, last up, but not certainly least, Distilled from Paverson Games. This one was one of the biggest surprises of 2021 on crowdfunding. $500,000. You're distilling spirits. Yeah, right? You can't make this stuff up. But Paverson Games had almost 8,100 backers on their campaign, which is amazing, especially for a first campaign. Essentially, you're just making spirits in your distillery, up to 1 to 4 players, 30 minutes per player, medium weight, they say, thematically incorporated Euro with resource management and tableau building and recipe managing. So I don't do anything with alcohol whatsoever, even like thematically as a thing. It's just like me, right? Like I'm not straight edge, but I'm, just anyway, side tangent there. But people really, really like this game. And it was supposed to be delivered in December 2022. And I think they were pretty close in the first quarter or so of 2023, if I'm remembering off the top of my head correctly. But people have been relatively impressed. And I've seen this have a relatively high demand on the secondary market so far. Over on Board Game Geek, it already has an 8 rating as well. 800 overall, which again is very impressive for a recent game to come out with 2,100 ratings comparatively, right? To all those other ones that I mentioned, that's a ton of ratings. And if you pull up the crowdfunding page right here, the higher level pledge for $85, which probably is a good value now, buying this all separately, stretch goals, base game, 2 expansions or combination expansion there with metal coins and coasters and play tiles. So yeah, I mean, it's probably, relatively good deal secondary market. And I haven't seen a whole lot of people selling it either. I've seen a lot more demand than supply. It's a game that's probably too heavy for me, 30 minutes per player. Although if 30 minutes is actually the playtime, I could probably handle it. But if it's like 45 to 50 to 60 minutes per player, it's probably not going to be for me. It's one of those that if somebody brought it to game night, I'd be like, hey, tell me how to play first, and then let me see. Again, from a thematic standpoint, Doesn't do anything for me. This is a game I'm probably never going to own, like I mentioned, for my own personal reasons, but people really seem to like it. So, Paverson Games, good job. Good job. Boom, there you go. July 2021 in the books, 2 years ago. Looking back at it and where are things at now? Told you, some stuff delivered, some stuff in the books, some stuff we can look back and say, where is it now? How do I feel about it since it's been delivered and since I've gotten it, or, haven't gotten it? Or the other side of things where, holy crap, it's still in production 2 years out from, the funding of the campaign. And we're looking at still months and months and months and months and months and months waiting for that. So like I say, on a weekly basis right now with my weekly crowdfunding roundups, it's not because you don't have the money, folks. It's just how much of these can you tie up every single week, every single month? And then, practically speaking, where are you going to put them? Table-wise, playtime-wise. I've sold half a dozen games in the last month. I'm trying to sell more. Trying to get rid of more. Because, again, looking for fantastic games. Not good games, fantastic games for me. And so I'm hopefully helping you find fantastic ones that are right for you as well. That's all I got. Stay classy. Have a great freaking fantastic day. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far in the video and you haven't subscribed to me, what's wrong with you? You should be subscribed. More of this awesome stuff to come. Can barely say that with a straight face most videos. Peace out.